welcome to another episode of the March and Silva MMA show. And as you can see, I'm not joined by the regular host, Lenny March. Instead, I'm joined by my new pal, Scuba Steve. Scuba Steve, how's it going?
It's going incredible, Oscar. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, it's your boy Scuba Steve. I'm glad to be on your show. It means a lot to have made the appearance, my man.
Yeah, it means a lot to me as well. We actually met up at the PFL Chicago event a couple weeks ago. We had a blast. We really hit it off. And I said, this guy really knows his stuff. Let's get him on the podcast and let's talk about UFC 301. Lenny, unfortunately, is vacationing in Poland right now and he couldn't be here. So we still have to preview this UFC 301 card from Brazil. And I think this card, sure, it's not as awesome as UFC 300, but this has a lot to love, and this has a Brazilian in every single fight. So there's an opportunity for the crowd to really voice their passion for the sport in each fight. And that's what I'm really looking forward to. So I say we started off with the main event of the evening. It is going to be the flyweight champion Alexandre Pantoja from Brazil taking on Steven Erceg from Australia. This, for me, is a Rocky story if I've ever seen one. This is a guy who is basically an unknown to your average UFC fan. He's only 3-0 in the UFC. He debuted in February of last year against a ranked man who was David Dvorak. And since then, he beat Alessandro Costa, and he also got a win against Matt Schnell by knockout in the Apex. And he's only ranked at number 10. This is completely unheard of to see a guy take that big of a leap, which is it's really going to be a make or break situation for Steve Erceg, because I honestly think that if he loses this, we could see a situation where people just look at him as a lower tier flyweight. And for Alexandre Pantoja, he's risking a lot in this spot too. Not only is this his first fight in Brazil in a long time, this is against, as I said, a guy who's ranked at number 10. So if he loses this, his stock goes down a lot. They were wanted to set up the trilogy with Brandon Moreno. They flew Pantoja out to Mexico for his fight with Brandon Royval, put him in the crowd. And you could see that Royval winning that fight was not expected because Pantoja already beat him back in December. So that's not interesting. That's why we have Steve Erceg in the spot. As for Steve Erceg, fantastic boxer. He's got really good skills on the ground. He's slick with the submissions, but for being real on the ground, it's really not the same level. Alexandre Pantoja, black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, he can take anybody's back with ease. And this is going to be a serious problem for Erceg in this fight. Ultimately, I'm going to have to go with Alexandre Pantoja by fourth round submission. Do you agree?
So I definitely agree. There's no doubt that when you're in the 5-round club, when you have that championship rub, you're going to have a intangible advantage versus your opponent. And may I set the record straight, Oscar? I really got to. This guy, I was so excited for Steve Erceg. Again, like that's what everyone's calling him. It would have been only the second Steven person who shares my namesake. I was incredibly proud of this, to actually challenge for a UFC title. The first one was a man named Stephen Graham, who challenged Randy Couture for the heavyweight title at UFC 13, way back in the 90s. And I was so disappointed to find out he don't spell his name right, Oscar. He spells it with a PH. It's Stefan Erceg. It's not Steve Erceg. If anything, it's Steph Erceg. But I mean, that's not here nor there. I love his skills. His boxing was on display in every single one of his fights, especially when we most recently saw him. He looked very well rounded, and I don't think this is a bad matchup at all. I really do enjoy that they're giving Erceg the ladder in this. Like he left, as many like to say, he let the ladder down. Pantoja let the ladder down for other fighters that may not have gotten the opportunity, and I'm actually really excited to say that. You know, I didn't think Pantoja was going to take a fight from a guy as ranked as low as 10. And I feel that Erceg's a very live dog in this fight. He has great boxing. He does have very Oliveira-esque jiu-jitsu in the sense where not in terms of numbers, in terms of how he fights for the submission. He's very offensive minded, and his sweeps and his takedowns are leading to the tap. He's not mainly trying to stay on top. He's there to fight for a choke or a joint lock, whatever it may be. He goes for the submission. In terms of the prediction itself, I don't think you can really say anything else other than Pantoja is going to win this fight, in my opinion, 8 times out of 10. There's obviously an opportunity for Erceg to really do well in this fight, but I think it's going to come down to the experience that Pantoja has, the acumen on the ground, and his experience in being in wars, especially his previous 2 fights against Moreno and Royval. I think at the end of the day, I think it is going to be Pantoja via decision.
Yeah, I really think that Pantoja has shown an ability to neutralize his opponents on the ground in the past. If you look at his last defense, it was against Brandon Royval. And Brandon Royval usually does not go the distance, but he decided to play it safe. And this is a guy that is learning from these championship fights that he can't just be this crazy brawler. He can't just take these risks in every fight. He has to play it safe at times. That's how you stay at the top end. I think he's only going to get better as he advances his time as a champion. And for Steve Erceg, there's really no shame in losing this in a way because, as I told you, really has not made his way up, really is not that high on experience. He's only got 13 pro fights, which is about half of what Pantoja has. So there's a scenario where we could see Steve make his way back to a title shot, but as I said, his time is just not now. But on the feet, it will be competitive, especially in the pocket. Erceg has got really good body hooks, and then he can go up top and clip guys. That's how he got Matt Schnell. But at the end of the day, Pantoja just has the skills on the ground to win this fight. And I said he'll win by rear naked choke in round 4. That's his bread and butter, that rear naked choke. We'll move on now to what I think is what most people are looking forward to the most on this card. It is the return of the King of Rio in Rio de Janeiro, Jose Aldo, the featherweight GOAT, as Alexander Volkanovski acknowledges him to be. I really think this guy is the complete package in many ways. He does have a fantastic striking, but the grappling is very high level too. It's just he uses it defensively. He's got a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He can wrestle, but he just stays on the feet and he butchers guys. And even though he did retire against Merab Dvalishvili, after that fight, he goes and he boxes, and he actually goes and gets 2 wins and goes to a draw with Jeremy Stevens. So he's still keeping his boxing sharp during this time. So it's not like this is a guy coming back into combat sports altogether. He's had his toes in the pool, if you will. So he still is sharp, in my opinion. And Jonathan Martinez, on the other hand, this is a guy that is not an easy fight for Jose in his return. I actually thought that we were going to see Jose Dominic Cruz. That's what I heard from a source. And Dominic Cruz, unfortunately, got hurt, so we didn't see that happen. Instead, we see Jonathan Martinez. And let me pull up Jonathan Martinez's fantastic run that he's been on. It's really been something to behold. A lot of people really doubted him after getting knocked out by Davy Grant. And as you can see, after that loss to Davy Grant in round 2 by knockout, he goes and he just racks off these wins, including guys like Cub Johnson, who's in the Hall of Fame, Saeed Nurmagomedov. This guy beat Nurmagomedov, and a lot of that fight was in the clinch. So he really has shown some good defensive grappling. But I think at the end of the day, we're going to see this fight play out on the feet, and both guys, I think, will be firing leg kicks here and there. But I think Martinez will be more aggressive with them. Jose Aldo has kind of stopped using them in the past, and he has fantastic defense for it. He knows exactly how to use his footwork to not get overwhelmed with the damage there, and I think that's going to cause trouble for Martinez. Martinez actually the favorite in this fight. I just think that people are looking at the age for Jose Aldo, the fact that, as I said, he's been away from the game for a little bit, But I do like Jose Aldo in the pocket. I think Jonathan Martinez does great at distance, not as great in the pocket. If Jose Aldo can close that distance and land some of those hooks that he loves to land, I think he can drop Jonathan Martinez and finish the job. I think I'll take him by second round TKO. Do you agree?
Yeah, so the thing with Jonathan Martinez is he reminds me of a young Jose Aldo. He is the second UFC fighter to have multiple stoppages via leg kicks. And Jose Aldo would be of that club if it weren't for his fight with Uriah Faber being in the WBC. And I really think that this shows the innate dog in Jose Aldo. He very well could have taken that fight with Dominic Cruz had he not been injured. But instead of doing that, instead of going after another mainstay in the division who has been there a while, that could be a potential fight that people look as like a legacy fight. It's obviously not going to be the same acumen as Dominic Cruz, but it still could have been someone else who's been a mainstay and been there a while. Instead, he goes and takes this fight against one of the most dangerous fighters in the division. As you said, Martinez is currently on a 6-fight win streak. He's looking excellent right now. And I think it really shows, the competitive spirit of Jose Aldo. And again, what else can you say for the King of Rio? I'm glad you agree. He's the greatest featherweight to ever do it. It only says he has 8 title fight wins because it was only in the UFC. If you go all the way back to the WEC before the UFC purchased it, there's not even close. He would potentially have as much, if not just below the amount of title fight wins as Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, who obviously holds the record. But I think the fact that he has not completely stepped away from combat sports still leaves him an opportunity to really succeed in this fight, in the clinch, in the close range, as you had mentioned. Because at the end of the day, if he stays at range with Jonathan Martinez, it may play out just as his fight with Adrian Yanez, how that played out with Yanez trying to get on the inside, and those moments where he was on the outside, he was getting absolutely chewed up with those leg kicks. And I really think that Jose is going to have to either check these or make a priority to check those, or bring back the leg kicks of old, bring back those Uriah Faber leg kicks that changed the entire trajectory of that fight. And I think even though Jose has all the experience and all the knowledge to win this fight, I really want to see how his body is going to hold up against a 30-year-old in Jonathan Martinez. I do believe that Martinez is going to have the edge in this fight, and I do think he takes this fight by decision. But I wouldn't be surprised if it goes the other way, if Jose is really able to stay defensively responsible and get a decision. Or Martinez is able to completely destroy Jose Aldo's defense and be able to stop him. At the end of the day, I have Martinez winning this by decision, but I feel that this fight could play out in a myriad of different ways.
Yeah, I really think that this is a very close fight, but I do think that Jose Aldo having the confidence of fighting in Rio, along with the fact that Jonathan Martinez has shown a little bit of durability issues in the past, I do think that Jose Aldo can steal this win. And I do think that this will be the loudest we hear the crowd the whole night. I think most people bought their tickets to see Jose come back. And we will move on to the featured bout at light heavyweight between Anthony Lionheart Smith and Vitor Petrino. This is a very fascinating fight from multiple angles. I think the biggest storyline here is the potential downfall of Anthony Smith. A lot of people think that Anthony Smith appears to be on a serious decline. And Vitor Petrino, on the other hand, is this young, hot, undefeated prospect. Fantastic 2023. He went 3-0, all finishes. He looks pretty much unstoppable. And this year he got a win over Tyson Pedro, retired him afterwards. But Anthony Smith, he's got this habit of ruining some prospects, man. He's really just destroyed what we thought of some people, like Ryan Spann, shut him down completely. Jimmy Crute shut him down. Volkan Oezdemir shut him down. This guy is a guy that is constantly underestimated, but he's so tough. He can take one hell of a beating, and he can make the comeback and get the finish late. That I feel is probably his greatest strength. That's where he looks the best. Even in the Gustafsson fight, which was like 2 months after his loss against John Jones for the title, he goes to Sweden, chokes out Gustafsson, and retires him. So Anthony Smith is better than a lot of people give him credit for, in my opinion. And Vitor Petrino, on the other hand, possesses greater physical gifts than Anthony Smith at the moment. Obviously, he's the younger man. Obviously, I think he's got a strength advantage. Anthony Smith actually used to be a middleweight. Vitor Petrino would never make middleweight, I don't think. So I think Vitor Petrino is going to try to bully Anthony Smith. I don't like that Vitor Petrino doesn't throw a lot. That for me is a big concern. I think in the Tyson Pedro fight, didn't even land 50 significant strikes in 3 rounds. So the volume's not too high. I think Anthony Smith might be higher when it comes to volume, but I do think that Petrino will land with greater impact, and that will sway the judges in the end. Not to mention the fact that Petrino can get some takedowns potentially. And Anthony Smith, if he doesn't get the submission, there's been many points where we see him stuck on his back. So I don't like that either from Anthony Smith. I was actually thinking of picking him, but I just can't pick him when there's a real potential that this guy could be on a serious decline. So I'm going to go with Petrino to get the win in Brazil.
I mean, I'm right there with you. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I've never been super complimentary of Anthony Smith's skills in particular. He's always been that fighter who is well-rounded, but not versed enough in one art or as high level in one aspect of fighting that is going to make him genuinely championship caliber, where he could, I mean, obviously he hasn't won a title, but it's not like he would even challenge to win that title, especially against a fighter like John Jones. He's 1-3 in his last 4, and I went back and watched the Ryan Spann fight. I thought that was a really, really close decision. To be honest, I was surprised that Anthony did as well as he did. I thought that Ryan Spann, after coming off that huge win against Dominic Reyes, was going to absolutely run through Anthony Smith like a freight train, but that was evidently not the case. You know, he looked a lot better than I had thought. And despite the fact he's 1-3 in his last 4, it's not like the experience and the grappling acumen that he does have could very well pose problems for Vitor Petrino. But on the other hand, I'm glad you mentioned that he was gun shy, because that was definitely something that I noticed in his fight against Tyson Pedro. Even though he was able to get the win and his jab looked excellent in that fight, I think that if he's able to pick up the pace a little bit more and overwhelm Anthony Smith, he's going to have a far better chance to get this fight finished early. In my personal opinion, I think Petrino could very well get this done via TKO in the first 2 rounds if he's able to throw more. I think that if this fight does make it to the ground, it has a much higher likelihood of going the distance, or at least going into the 3rd round. But if it stays on the feet, I think Anthony Smith is going to get picked apart if Petrino chooses to be less gun shy. But I do have Vitor Petrino via TKO.
Yeah, that's just the logical choice here. But as I mentioned, Anthony Smith has won a ton as an underdog. So we'll see what happens in that fight. But the next fight on the main card is Michel Pereira versus Ihor Potieria. I love this fight because I know for a fact that we're going to see some violence. Somebody is going to get finished in this fight. Michel Pereira is one of the most exciting fighters on the roster. He's got this fantastic highlight reel, flying knees, fantastic submissions. And in his last fight, he could not have looked better. He fought Michal Oleksiejczuk, and in that fight, he hurts him with a body shot and then gets a rear naked choke within a minute. That is unheard of. Michel Pereira should have never been at welterweight. I think he was cutting too much weight. At this weight class, he even looks like a big man. So he really used that physicality to his advantage. He's got really good speed too. Ihor Potieria actually used to be a light heavyweight, and then he moved down, and he had some success against a debutant named Robert Erceg, who turned out to not be that high level. Ihor Potieria had one of the craziest fights last year. He fought Rodolfo Bellato. That was the fight where he won round one, and then in round two he completely gassed out and he got demolished. We could see a similar situation like that, but I actually think that Michel Pereira gets a quick finish in this fight. When he debuted at middleweight, he fought who was it? My mind is blanking on the name right now, but a very strong wrestler who has a ton of wins in the UFC, and he was able to get this quick finish in about 2 minutes. The name will come back to me right here. It was Andre Petrosky. Andre
That's
Petrosky
right. That's
is a
right. I was about
fantastic
to pull
wrestler. A
up
lot of
Typology
people
myself.
had doubts about yeah, has a lot of great wins in the division grappling guys. He didn't even get to take down Michelle because Michelle just overwhelmed him with power. And I think that's what's going to happen here. I think that Michelle enjoys a significant speed advantage against Ihor Poteria, and I think he finishes him in round one. Poteria, as I said, took a lot of damage last year. I think his durability probably won't be the same after that. So that's what I'm expecting, a quick finish that probably gets performance tonight for Michel Pereira.
Damn, predicting the performance of the night too. Look at you, Oscar. You're a consummate professional.
Yeah.
What I do have to say about this fight though is that Michel Pereira is so much more dangerous at middleweight, and I completely agree, and as many would agree. I feel like he was draining himself so much going to 170 pounds. He's 6'1". What are like I mean, sure, we've seen taller fighters in lighter weight classes, namely Jalen Turner being 6'3" and fighting at lightweight, but that's neither here nor there. What is here though is that he's on a 7-fight win streak. He ran through Mikhail. I think it's Mikhail Olejniczuk, but I mean, he ran through Olejniczuk like a freight train. That was like Olejniczuk had stolen his wallet and he was attempting to beat him for having tried to do so. And it was a beautiful performance. And it all has to do with his style. He is so wild that it makes people question what the next best step is. He is so good at stand-up and so good at using his capoeira and especially his athleticism to make all of his opponents second guess what their next best move is. And even though there is a proverbial size disadvantage since Poteria was once a light heavyweight, I think that it's going to be the speed and it's going to be the diversity with which he can strike that is going to allow him to find success. If anything, one thing I've noticed, with fighting, you don't always hear people talk about the faster guy being the more dangerous. This is certainly going to be the case with this fight. I think Poteria is not diverse enough in the striking. I don't think his ground game is quite good enough to really change the level of this fight. And even if that were the case, Pereira has also looked great on the ground as of late, which I feel like I would have never thought since I saw him running around the cage and chasing after people and doing backflips and all these things. But I think at the end of the day, I definitely have Pereira taking this via TKO. I think it could be early. I want to see what Poteria is going to bring to the table, but I could definitely see it happening in the first round.
Yeah, he's super explosive. And he showed it in his first two middleweight fights. So let's see what's next for him. I honestly thought we were going to see a ranked opponent for him after the Michal win. But I do think that with a win here, he does get a step up. Now let's move on to the opening fight.
I just thought he would be deserving of that. He stops him in the first round. It's a perfect opportunity just to really test his mettle.
Yeah, and there's plenty of guys that I think he would be favored to beat in that top 15 at middleweight for sure.
Definitely.
And the opening fight on the main card is the Scottish warrior Paul Craig versus Caio Borralho. This is a grappler's delight for sure. I really think that this is a fantastic opportunity for Caio Borralho. Paul Craig used to be a complete contender at light heavyweight. This man handed the first loss to Magomed and Goliath, the first loss to Jamal Hill. Both men, he took their own. So he is dangerous. You cannot never underestimate him, no matter what situation he's in. He tapped ankle live with a second left in the fight. So he's always going to be dangerous. And Caio Borralho is 5-0 in the UFC after getting 2 wins on the Contender Series. Dana White made him come back to the Contender Series, and he knocked his opponent out. So he's more than earned his shot in the UFC, and he's done nothing but dominate his opponents in the UFC. He's looked so good in each and every fight. He usually takes his opponents down, takes their back, and occasionally will snatch up a rear naked choke. He trains with Damian Maia occasionally in Brazil. So we know he's always trying to elevate his game. He comes from a team called the Fighting Nerds, which he leads. And these guys love to watch tape. They love to game plan properly for their opponents. And I love it. I think more fighters should have this approach because to give you an example, last week we had Ryan Spann lose his fight against Bogdan Guskov. Ryan Spann, he admits to never watching tape, and I think that is the wrong way to go about it. You need to be aware of the dangers that your opponent really presents to you. So I like what Kai Bahayo does. And Paul Craig, a lot of these fights, he succeeds by pulling guard. And earlier today, I saw him say he's not going to pull guard. He's going to try to strike because he's been training his striking. And honestly, I don't think it's a great way to go about it. He's not quick on the feet. I think he potentially could have some power on the feet, but it's not like Caio Borralho is super hittable either. He's got this karate style, which he says was inspired by Conor McGregor, which is fantastic. It's really good to stay evasive. So Caio Borralho, if he wants to, can win this on the feet. And I honestly think if he wants to, he can get a takedown on Paul Craig, take his back, maybe choke him out, maybe not. This is a guy that is not going to rush submissions. He's all about the position over the submission. So he's going to be happy to just backpack him and let the clock run out. And I think that's what he does here. I think we're going to see a unanimous decision victory for Caio Borralho.
That's initially what I was thinking. And then I go back and I watch a lot of tape of Caio and watching what he does bring to the table on the feet, because that's really going to be the difference maker here. He has already shown his acumen on the ground. He's already shown his diverse skill set, and he's incredibly dynamic on the feet. I think that it could very well make Paul Craig potentially make him make a mistake in shooting at the wrong time and potentially regretting it. I mean, whether it's a knee, whether it's an uppercut, whatever it may be, you could see that the distance with which Borralho keeps from his opponent leaves those that are shooting for takedowns at risk. And even though it is always dangerous with Paul Craig, again, the best guys he's beat have only gotten to either win or fight for titles. Yet he's managed to falter amongst the I hate to say it like this because this is inherently disrespectful, but those that could be seen as, B level, as mid, as not great, as I'm not going to say mediocre because that's even more disrespectful, but you can never count the guy out in the fight. I mean, Paul Craig has shown that he can pull a win out of a loss as quick as anyone. And even though I feel that he thinks that increasing his striking training and, really making an emphasis to try to be more well-rounded, I just think it's too late. You really got to just lean into your specialities here. Ryan Hall, for example, is not out here saying that he's going to start knocking out all his opponents. He uses these crazy kicks and all these crazy techniques to bring the fight to the ground. And I think, especially with his previous appearance on UFC Embedded, he was really putting an emphasis on his striking training, and that's all well and good, but this is not the fight to bring out your striking. Caio is far too dangerous on the feet and far too elusive for him to act like he's going to outstrike him. And I like what you say. I mean, I like that you mentioned that he is a part of that camp, because if there are major league teams, if the NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB, all these guys are watching film and studying their opponents, why shouldn't fighters? There's no negative effects that you're going to realize because that you studied too much. And I think that that is going to lead Kaio to a more efficient way of earning the win here. And I definitely have him winning. But instead of decision, I think he may very well be able to get the finish via TKO.
Yeah, that's really on the table here too. He does want to get that bonus. He said in an interview in order to buy a MetaQuest so he can play video games with Matt Serra on VR. So I hope that happens for him.
Man, me too. I mean, Matt Serra, watching him geek out on Joe Rogan over all of his stuff, over all of his VR stuff. I mean, it's a joy. Who knows? Maybe we'll see a league of esports UFC fighters.
Yeah, I would like to see it. UFC 5 already has some for some fans, but if you get the fighters in there, I think, can you imagine if you get some ranked fighters playing each other in the UFC game? Now that would be something fun.
I pose an even more interesting proposition. Make them play as the other fighter. Make them play as their opponent. I feel like that would be interesting to see because, you know, that would play into the understanding they have of their opponent. Obviously, UFC 5 is not like a definitive representation of what each fighter is. Like, even with them adding Michael Venom Page, you're not really fighting with Michael Venom Page. You're fighting with the skill set that they've attributed to Michael Venom Page in the video game. And I feel like just shaking that up a little bit, making them play as their opponent, I think that may prove to be rather entertaining.
Yeah, and I really have to thank you for your time and joining me for this preview. You were very generous with your dedication to this particular preview, and I really believe that people should go and find whatever you're doing on YouTube, whether it's the interviews, the breakdowns. Tell the people where they can find you.
Well, Oscar, thank you so much for having me. First and foremost, you are a consummate professional, as I had mentioned. You definitely do your work too. And that's not like I was even questioning that to begin with. I just really appreciate and relish the fact that this was an incredible opportunity that I had. You guys can all find me on Southern California's official combat sports show, Slingin' Leather. That is SLINGIN apostrophe leather with an exclamation point on YouTube. And we do fighter interviews with boxers. We most recently had Ivan Calderon, Justin Villoria, and many others that were generous enough to give me an interview. We talk UFC, we talk boxing, we talk all combat sports, and it's a great time. I think you guys would enjoy it, especially if you guys appreciate Oscar's incredible content. I think you guys would fall right in line there.
All right, as you said, make sure to go find his channel on YouTube, Slingin' Fists, and I do think that we're about
Slinging leather. Slinging leather, baby.
Slingin' Leather. Slingin' Leather. Don't you forget it. And make sure to enjoy the fight, Scuba Steve. And
Absolutely,
also,
you as well.
I think we can expect Scuba Steve to make a return to the program sooner rather than later.
Well, that's very nice of you, Oscar. I really appreciate it. And whenever you want me on, count me in. Just one thing. Remember to protect yourself at all times, brother. That's the calling line at the end of every episode. Remember to protect yourself at all times.
All right, man. Thanks for your time.
You have a great one, sir.
All right. And there goes Scuba Steve to finish the preview of the main card for UFC 301. Now we move on to the prelims. These prelims are actually quite appetizing for the hardcore fans. If you really know these people, I think you're going to have a really good time watching this card. So Joe Anderson Brito is taking on Jack Shore. This is a fantastic fight. Jack Shore was a fantastic undefeated prospect at bantamweight, moves up to featherweight, takes on Makwan Amirkhani, finishes him in round 2. Since then, he's kind of had some injuries, but now he's taking on a monster, quite frankly, in Joe Anderson Brito. Joe Anderson Brito, I feel like this guy's kind of overlooked. He has a win over Diego Lopez in the Contender Series, the guy that everybody's very high on right now. He has a win over him, and he's shown fantastic punching power. He's shown really good submission offense. He got a guillotine in his last fight against Jonathan Pierce. So that was something that a lot of people were not expecting. And against Andre Fili, knocks him out in round one. And I honestly think that his physicality will be overwhelming for Jack Shore, who used to fight at bantamweight and also struggled against the physicality of Ricky Simone, who is a bantamweight. So I think it's going to be a little too much for Jack Shore to handle. And in the next fight, oh, and the pick for that fight is Joanna Brito by second round TKO. And the following fight is Karolina Kovalevich against Yasmin Lucindo. This is another prospect versus veteran fight. Karolina Kovalevich had a fantastic career comeback. She went on a 5-fight win streak after going on a 5-fight losing streak. Yasmin Lucindo is in her early 20s. In the last fight, she submitted Polyana Viana, and her hands are very good as well. In her first fight in the UFC, she took on Yasmin as well, and that fight was very close, back and forth, and that was a fantastic fight. But I do think that her grappling will pose problems for Karolina Kovalevich, who struggled with it before, but she's had the pleasure to fight some of these women that are not as great with their physicality as Lucindo. Lucindo, I think, can get takedowns. I think can establish top position and keep it on the ground and on the feet. I think she can actually land the bigger shots too. So I have to go with Lucindo. And then we'll move on to Elvis Brenner versus Mitebek Olobai. This is amazing. I think this fight could end up being the best fight on this card. Elvis Brenner has caused so many upsets in his UFC run. Even in his debut, takes on Tagir Ulanbekov, who comes out of the Habib camp and wins that decision. Mitebek Olobai also took on who was it, Uros Medic in his debut, which was up a weight class, and he completely mauled him, choked him out in round two. Elvis Brenner, on the other hand, I do think that his greatest performance was against Guram Kutateladze. That was a fight that nobody was expecting him to win. I think Guram was minus 600 in that spot. And Elvis Brenner was able to stuff takedowns, and whenever he got taken down, he got up and he pieced him up, made him tired. He got the finish by knockout in round three. I think Mitebek Olobai is a very talented wrestler for Kyrgyzstan. He's got the skills, but I don't think he's that great with the top control. I think he lets his opponents get up. I think Elvis Brenner will have plenty of opportunities to get up and do more damage. And one thing that I need to mention is that this fight is in Brazil with Brazilian churches who will naturally have the bias towards the Brazilian fighter. And they also will be healing that ruckus Brazilian crowd. So I will have to go with Elvis Brenner to do more damage on the feet and win a close decision over the hot prospect Mitebek Olobai. We'll move on now to Joaquin Silva versus Drakkar Klose. This is a really good fight. Joaquin Silva is a guy that has had a very up and down UFC run. He's a little bit on the older side now, but honestly, the best moment of his UFC career was when he hurt and dropped Arman Tsarukyan. Arman Tsarukyan is currently the number one contender, and he had him in real trouble in round two of their fight last year. He eventually did get finished in that fight, and then he goes on to fight Clay Guida. That fight was quite competitive too, but he really was able to have the better boxing, better power, and he almost got Clay Guida with a guillotine. He's got good jiu-jitsu. Drakkar Klose is a very well-rounded fighter, but I think his boxing is his primary strength, and I think he's going to use it here against Silva, who, as I said, a little older, maybe not too durable. He did get knocked out by Ricky Glenn in round one a couple of years back. I think Drakkar Klose has the power to put him away. If you remember, Drakkar Klose got the crazy KO last year in Austin. He got the slam KO against Joe Stalecki after being put in an armbar. He puts him to sleep with that slam. He also was able to knock out who else was he? He was able to knock out a former PFL prospect with ease, and even in the Benio Dariush fight, he had him on skates. So I really like Jacar Close's chances to get a finish in round two. And then we'll move on to the early prelims. Mauricio Rufi versus Jamie Malarkey. This, quite frankly, is kind of sad for me to say, but Jamie Malarkey's chin appears to have gone. He got knocked out by Nasrat Haqparast in his last fight, and he's been knocked out plenty round three for fights against Alexander Volkanovski. There's so many times when he's taken crazy amounts of damage, and he's dealing with Mauricio, who is a crazy power puncher. I do think that Jamie Malarkey has a better skill set, but the durability just isn't there. And I think he's going to get clipped at one point or another in this fight, and it's going to be lights out. So I'm going to take Mauricio by round two knockout. And then Diani Barbosa versus Ernesto Cascate. I think that one is a clear grappler versus striker fight. Diani Barbosa likes to get the takedowns, get the top position. Ernesto Cascate likes to stand and strike. I'm going to have to go with Barbosa here. Barbosa has a similar amount of experience to Ernesto, but I do like the fact that she got a win over Karina Silva back in the day. That is a great feather in her cap. I don't know how good her grappling defense is, so I don't know if I can trust it, so I will have to go with Barbosa by decision. Then Ismail Bonfim versus Vince Pichel at lightweight. I think this is a great bounce back fight for Ismail after unfortunately losing to Benoit Saint-Denis last year. Vince Pichel is a guy that has been riddled with injuries in his UFC run. He just cannot stay consistent. I think that Ismail Bonfim will take advantage of the fact that Pichel is coming off this long layoff. He's a little older. Potentially, we could see the durability fade, and Bonfim usually gets impressive finishes, just like his KO via flying knee in Brazil over Terrence McKinney last year. So I think we see him finish Vince Pichel in round two by knockout. Then the opening fight on the card is Alessandro Costa versus Kevin Borjas. This one is a certified banger. If you've seen either guy fight, you know that this fight will be fantastic and back and forth. Kevin Borjas, I think, is a really valuable underdog here. This guy has an incredibly high striking volume. Sure, he lost to Joshua Van this past November, but Van is a top prospect, a guy with all the skills to potentially challenge for the title. And Borjas had a close fight with him. In fact, he was able to hurt him on more than one occasion. Alessandro Costa, he had to fight Amir Abbasi in his UFC fight, which is not easy. Then he destroys Jimmy Flick, and he loses to Steve Erceg. Alessandro Costa, he does have power on the feet. He does have really good jiu-jitsu, but I think that Kevin Borjas can go out here and land more strikes. And when I say more, I think significantly more. He can really put up some numbers, and I think he'll be undeniable for the judges to give him the victory by decision. I think that the Brazilian fans will not be too happy at the beginning of the card, and that sums it up for the UFC 301 preview show. I hope you guys enjoyed the edition of Scuba Steve, and we will have Lenny back this upcoming week to recap all the action at UFC 301 and preview the upcoming fight night, which honestly I'm not too hyped for, but you got to take what you can get. So that wraps it up. Make sure to enjoy the fights.